I'm just warning people that we can't call all of our political enemies domestic terrorists.
Matt Kibbe joining us live here on the Wake Up America show. Good morning, Matt, and welcome to the Wake Up America show, brother.
Listen, I'm a little uncomfortable with you putting a target on my back, but I guess I have to accept that. So,
Hey, Matt, let's honor Charlie. He was an incredible young man. Achieved things that I could never even dream to achieve. What a terrible loss, wasn't it?
oh, it was awful, and I knew him when he was a high school activist, when I was a Tea Party organizer, and I got to meet him very early on. And he was such a smart, precocious young man that like he would seek people out, and he would find a way to connect with people. And even back then we had spirited arguments about his conservative versus my libertarian perspective. And up until my last conversation with him, I will tell you that he was a big tent organizer and very influenced by libertarian ideas. So we always got along even when we disagreed. And I think that was part of his magnetism, right? He could talk to people that he disagreed with, and you felt like you were actually having a conversation instead of an argument.
I love hearing that, and I know my audience does too, Matt, because we have a very libertarian audience here, but we also kind of blend it with the MAGA crowd because there's a lot of overlap. And I saw that with Charlie Kirk as well. He was very libertarian in certain ways. He was very much he was very not an authoritarian, right? He wasn't the type of person who was really all about punishing his enemies and using the government against his enemies. In the scenario that we're talking about now in Jimmy Kimmel, I wonder how he would have felt about it. Sadly, he's not here to offer his opinion, but I wonder what your thoughts are in regards to Jimmy Kimmel and him being let go at ABC. Do you look at this as a danger to free speech, or do you look at this as the media isn't a free market anyway? They're supposed to act in the public interests, something in between, more nuanced? Share with us your thoughts.
All of that. It's a very complicated situation. The FCC has unique power to sort of browbeat and jawbone network TV. It's kind of a dinosaur in that sense because most people, particularly young people, are watching things like this instead of network TV. And late night TV was dying, and the death knell was certainly the sort of intolerant authoritarianism of all these late night talk show hosts. They're supposed to be funny. I remember when comedy would poke fun at authoritarianism coming from the left or the right, and Jimmy Kimmel didn't do that anymore. And like the clip in question, there was no joke in there. It wasn't funny. It was in very poor taste and disrespectful. And I'm old enough to remember when Jimmy Kimmel broke down in tears because someone had shot a lion. Do you remember that thing? I didn't have time to grok it, but so maybe show a little bit of compassion. The problem is the FCC weighed in. Trump's chairman weighed in and started browbeating both ABC and the affiliates to do that, and they can't afford to piss off the FCC. So I wish that the Trump administration would have stayed out of it completely and let Jimmy Kimmel die a natural and humiliating TV death, because he was not funny. He was dying, and his audience, he pissed them off with the Charlie Kirk thing, and we should have just let the market work.
I agree with you, Matt, and I think it is important for us to articulate the ideal, but I think the realizations of the Trump era are that many of these MAGA people were former Ron Paul people. Neocons used to describe themselves as liberals mugged by reality. Many MAGA people describe themselves as Tea Party supporters or Ron Paul supporters who were mugged by reality in regards to bringing the gun, the metaphorical bringing of the gun to the knife fight. And noting that television, which I worked in for a number of years, and which tangentially you've been affiliated with as well, television is not a free market. It's licensed. The FCC controls who gets the license. In an ideal market, there would be no licensing, and they would either homestead the spectrum or it would get auctioned off to the highest bidder. So I mean, in some sense, we really are kind of always choosing between the lesser of two evils. So, we've fought cancel culture for years. I don't consider people losing their jobs for calling for bloody murder cancel culture. I consider that to be something more like consequence culture. And I wonder if you agree, Matt. I mean, I can't help but wonder if some part of you even, right? You're very stoic, very, rational, thoughtful libertarian. If you don't sometimes see the point of what MAGA talks about when they talk about, bringing the gun to the knife fight versus the Romney McCain years where it was not libertarian tangential. There were no former libertarians, now MAGA Republicans who are in power. Do you sort of see that argument they're talking about in terms of taking the weapon from the enemy's hands and at least giving them a good nick across the forehead before you throw the ring of power into Mount Doom, so to speak?
Right. I totally get where they're coming from. And it's perhaps ironic that Matt Taibbi had just released in a more extensive deep dive into how Twitter, at the behest of the censorship industrial complex, actually deplatformed Charlie Kirk. But I do think, first of all, the entire conservative, libertarian, America First community never depended on network TV, in large part because we were completely shut out. And that was both government and sort of the liberal dominance on these platforms. Obviously, with the exception of Fox News, and Greg Gutfeld is doing better than all these guys. But that said, like our bread and butter is technological innovation and free speech outside of the system. So when I hear AOC complaining about not using the government well enough to stop her political enemies, I'm like, welcome to the fight, lady. Welcome to being foisted on your own petard. I think we lose if we just fight over the ring. And I'm getting a lot of comments this morning about something I posted saying from MAGA, America First, Republicans, our strategy, according to them, is to never lose power. And I think that's a wildly naive strategy. So I would suggest that our strategy should be free market in ideas. Jimmy Kimmel was about to be destroyed by the market, by his own audience. Let it happen that way. If we set the precedent that we need to use the government to censor our enemies, I still think it gets a lot worse than it's been the next time a Democrat takes over.
Okay, Matt. I mean, there's a really good, strong argument for that, and I'll definitely consider it. I see you got a lot of fans over there in the office or in the Rumble comments. Frickety says, having Matt Kibbe on the show is very cool. Somebody else says, I subscribe to Blaze TV, enjoy watching Kibbe on Liberty. Ike Given a Shits, who very much gives a shits, says, Matt is wise. We couldn't say Ike Given a Shits if we were on television.
That's right.
Next topic, Matt Kibbe, is the Antifa angle. Now, I've been to a lot of protests. I've organized a few protests, and I was at Occupy Wall Street, Zuccotti Park, trying to talk to people about the Federal Reserve and why abolishing the Federal Reserve and central banking is a good thing. Maybe the socialists could get on board with that. Of course, the socialists the true communists and socialists who follow the Karl Marx platform, they know that they want the central bank. Bernie Sanders doesn't want to abolish the Fed. He wants to be in control of it. He wants the government to have total control. He doesn't want there to be anything like Fed independence. That being said, at these events, we're always violent anarchist. When I say anarchist, I mean the lefty types, the anarcho-syndicalists, right? The collectivists who were always there causing trouble, throwing rocks, right? Pouring bottles of water on people's head, engaging in and activating violence at these events. Donald Trump has now come out and suggested that he's going to call them not just a terrorist organization, but a sick and twisted terrorist organization. Is this the right move in your opinion, Matt?
So I know Andy No has documented the violence of Antifa going way back to the early days in Portland, Oregon, which is now the shell of the city it used to be. And I think we should always denounce violence, whether it's by individuals or organized by organizations. But I don't know what the legal implications are of designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. I would rather hold the individuals who commit acts of violence accountable as individuals. And I'm a little bit anxious about this phrase domestic terrorism, because as you know, I was a Tea Party organizer going all the way back to 2008, and the Ron Paul movement fed into that. And I'm old enough to remember when an organization called Organizing for America, which had been Organizing for Obama, so Obama's campaign arm, actually called Tea Party activists domestic terrorists. They quickly took it down because there was an outrage and all that. But
Yeah, that was the
these
MIAC
were,
report, and the Bob Barr supporters, Ron Paul
yeah,
supporters, domestic terrorists. The Homeland Security Department put that out.
right. And fast forward to the memo that Tulsi Gabbard released, I think in April, that was the fully unredacted Biden administration strategy to formally designate moms and pops showing up at school board meetings, anybody with a Gadsden flag, anybody questioning the COVID industrial complex as, wait for it, domestic terrorists. So I think, and I know what MAGA is going to say. Like they did it to us. Hold my beer. We have to do it back to them. I think we need to maintain the principle that individuals who commit acts of violence versus individuals who are speaking truths of power in the town square. And I think there's a bright line there.
Can we compromise, though? Can we, instead of going full blown MAGA, can we just do it to them 2 or 3 times until they feel the pain, like you have to do sometimes to a bully, right? Sometimes the bully keeps bullying you until you finally give him a few knocks, and then we can declare a ceasefire, but it'll be on our terms rather than ceasefire on their terms.
Yeah. I mean, if there is a candidate for the designation domestic terrorist, it is Antifa. Their philosophy going all the way back to their anti-fascist roots right after World War II was explicitly violent. It's explicitly Marxist, which I repeat myself because it's a violent strategy and ideology that believes that the only way to disrupt the system is to hurt people and take their stuff. So I totally get it. I'm just warning people that we can't call all of our political enemies domestic terrorists, and we should always designate the reason why Antifa is a terrorist organization is because they promote violence. And it's violence committed by individuals against individuals. That is the standard. And I just don't want us to keep going down this road where our political opposition, we immediately call them terrorists.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, and it's sort of a crossroads that we find ourselves at, Matt. I mean, we really hoped for a libertarian movement back in 2016 when Rand Paul was running for president. And, Rand Paul sort of like falling to the back of the pack there was the primary motivator for me to jump into the libertarian race to try and keep the movement that felt like it went from being at the top of the tower to being on life support. And it still does feel very much like the liberty movement in the United States specifically is on life support. It's good to see Javier Milei of Argentina making great strides for our ideas down there. He finally is answering the question that we were always needled with: when have libertarians' ideals ever been tried? And we had to explain to them American history and what the Gilded Age was really about, and Grover Cleveland and Calvin Coolidge, endless events and conventions that you and I attended and spoke at, Matt, to try and talk to people about these ideas that are the ideas of American liberty. But it sometimes feels as if with the MAGA people, I don't always think that this is the case, but I do think that it sometimes feels like these are the muscle, the armed muscle of those libertarian ideas. It's kind of like you hire armed guards to do violence. And I supported Donald Trump for the very libertarian things that he had done in his first term, and I had a whole long list of them. I could bring it out here. But it does feel like the American movement is on life support to an extent, Kibbe. And I wonder if you would talk to that very briefly. Talk to us about your thoughts about where the American liberty movement is right now. Do you feel like it's at a crossroads? Do you feel like we're weaker than we've ever been? Because I certainly don't feel anything like what we had during the 2008 Ron Paul years. It feels like it's deflated like a balloon. Your thoughts?
Well, we're in the middle of something. We're in the middle of this radically democratized, decentralized technology movement. And I think that's why the censorship industrial complex arose out of that to stop us. And they've been trying to stop us every step of the way. I think there is a beautiful new coalition forming. And you saw huge elements of it in the Trump coalition, the Maha wing of the party and the wing that I call Make America Free Again, the MAFA wing. And it's about civil liberties. It's a visceral reaction against lockdown authoritarianism. And a lot of these issues are things that Ron Paul is still talking about. So I'm not so sure. I think there's a libertarian populism emerging. And I think we're part of this is sort of a reaction to what we tried to do during the Tea Party, which was follow the rules. They said, if you believe in democracy, you have to show up and protest. If you believe in democracy, you have to get involved in elections. You have to elect better people. And I blame the Republican Party for this. We brought all of that to the table. And then the old guys, the Mitch McConnells of the party, said, you know what? We love the fact that you voted for us, but we don't give a damn about your priorities. So that's in large part where the MAGA movement came from. They're like, screw you, hold my beer. We're gonna break the system. But I think that's the middle of the story, and I think that the liberty movement is still potent, and you can see this with the rising national popularity of guys like Thomas Massey. Even though Trump's mad at him, even though parts of MAGA are mad at him, he's actually doing the things that Trump said he was going to do. And to me, that's sort of that libertarian populism that could be quite
He
potent.
does, but boy, are we going to need a turn of the cards. It's kind of like playing Texas Hold'em, right? We're kind of hoping that the river is going to save us to some extent because what I fear is that, and you're right about Thomas Massey, but what I fear is that he becomes another Ron Paul in Congress, right? I fear that Rand Paul becomes another Ron Paul in Congress, not passing any legislation, making more enemies than friends. And certainly I find it inspiring when we hear these brilliant men talking about the principles of liberty and standing up for these things. But, and certainly maybe he could be a martyr. Like Charlie Kirk is probably his martyrdom will now bring more people to his cause. But quite frankly, I feel, Matt, as if the libertarian movement needs fewer martyrs and more live champions of liberty. Can you understand what I mean?
100%. And I should say, like everything that I do at Free the People, I am a recovering political activist because I decided quite a while ago, actually after I did a super PAC for Rand Paul when he was running for president in 2016. And I decided after that I was going to take a step back from politics and focus on education and culture and turning people on to these values, because as Andrew Breitbart always taught us, politics is downstream of culture. Mm-hmm. And I view Ron Paul, first of all, he was not so much a politician or a member of Congress. He was a cultural icon using politics as a soapbox to turn people on to ideas. And Thomas Massey has very much become that. And Rand Paul, who is now the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, is sort of particularly focused on COVID accountability. And he's about to subpoena Anthony Fauci again, and we're going to get some answers there. But their importance is not necessarily that one Dr. No in the House or Senate. Their importance is their ability to build a national audience like Charlie Kirk did. Like Charlie Kirk wasn't a politician. And I would argue he's probably more effective outside the system than in, even though he was wildly politically active.
Mm-hmm. Boy, Matt, I love hearing this. And I think you're right. To some extent, Thomas Massey is a cultural leader. I wish he was a more effective political leader. Some of that is within his control. Some of that is not. If for some reason he loses his seat, and I hope that doesn't happen, I hope that he goes out and does more documentaries like the one that he did about living off the grid. I think he could probably inspire more of the Maha type people if you were to say produce some media for him for that. If you were to I could see you leading a whole swarm of activists who are producing content around Massey's brilliant career and his engineering background, and maybe even some more inventions to add to his list of patents and intellectual property. Who knows? But I'm afraid that the American liberty movement needs a reboot, like a Frankenstein's monster. A Frankenstein needs to come along and put some electricity back into the monster, because it just feels like everybody has sort of retreated to like their little kingdoms, and we don't have the cohesiveness that we used to have. I don't know if it would take one galvanizing moment like a leader, or some event, right? Like some black swan event that we could never foresee. But I find myself looking at Argentina and being jealous. For the first time ever in my life, I look at another country and I'm jealous of them. I've never felt that way. I love my country. I love America. But when I see what's happening in South America, it makes me very sad to see where we're at right now and where they're going. And Matt, is there anything else anything on this that you think we missed, or perhaps you'd like to share, or is there any project you're working on you'd like to plug?
Yeah, but by the way, so Free the People primarily is about producing video content, documentaries. We produce a lot of comedy, and the idea is to reach people outside of our bubble. The very first documentary we made was Off the Grid with Thomas Massey, and that has helped turn Thomas into a cult classic. When his wife Rhonda passed away, we went back and reworked it a little bit to include songs that we had sort of secretly recorded with Thomas playing banjo and Rhonda singing as an homage and respect to her. The point is, like, how do we talk to people that aren't in our little bubble, right? Like, I've read all the books. Austin, you've read all the books. We have this beautiful history of being libertarian activists / thinkers, but how do we reach people that have never heard of the L word or any of these things? And I think the one thing, I'll wrap up with this, the one thing that was inspiring about Charlie Kirk, who was not a libertarian, is conservative with a lot of libertarian leanings, he would go talk to people. And I think that empathetic understanding of where people are coming from, really struggling to figure out, what are you trying to say to me? Even though you're using this code language that maybe comes from the woke left, what are you actually trying to say? And could we find some common ground in those values? And the hard line is, like, if you want a conversation and not violence, I'm at least willing to talk to you.
Matt Kibbe, you give me hope. I appreciate that. I haven't felt hope in a long time for the liberty movement in the United States. Maybe we need to have you come back more a little often. Thanks for being so generous with your time, Matt. And it looks like you got a lot of fans in the audience, so keep up the good work. All right, brother?
Thank you, sir.
Have a great day.